Well, as I promised, if we did another video, you'd have to stay tuned to see what the test results were if we kind of changed the experiment. If you didn't see the other video, we actually did an experiment with these dust collectors, and we used 150 pounds of flour to determine whether they work or not. And at the end of that video, I still had a question mark whether or not the dust collectors worked, because I feel like I sucked up too much flour. Okay, and of course I'm not using sawdust because that kind of makes sense. I want to use something that's super fine. It's probably going to plug the vacuums up. I think that's kind of intuitive in this process. So what we're doing today is we're going to redo this experiment, and you guys who've been watching that video had some really great comments. A lot of you suggested doing smaller amounts of flour and then checking the filter more often. I totally agree. So let's kind of walk through what we're going to do today as an experiment, and then stay tuned, we'll have to see what happens. So to try to make the last test as valid as possible, we have 3 brand new vacuums and we had 3 brand new filters. But today we're going to be using, well, used filters, but they were only used for the last test. I've done my best to try to clean the flour and the chalk out of these things, but as you can see, they're not exactly brand new. So I guess you'll have to just make a decision about whether you trust the results of today's experiment. To try to make this more conclusive, I've mixed up the chalk colors from the color that we'll be vacuuming up. So I think we're going to be vacuuming up blue, but the filter is covered in red chalk. We put chalk in this flour to try to make it obvious how much passed through the system. So we're just using regular chalk line chalk, and the colors, well, they all make sense.
We're testing 3 different models of dust collectors. All are under $100 and can be bought online. First, we have the Dust Right system. It includes the dust bin, casters, and necessary hoses. Second, the Dust Deputy. You can buy it separate and use your own bucket and lid with some DIY. We chose their package deal, which includes the pre-cut lid, the bucket, and the casters. Finally, we have the Dustopper. It includes the dust collector and a hose. You'll have to provide the bucket. Assembling each dust collector can be done with very basic tools, and it takes less than 15 minutes. These all fit most larger wet-dry vacuums with 2 or 2.5-inch hoses.
All right, I think we're getting really close to starting this experiment. So we got the grounding wire set up. We followed the instructions on the Dust Deputy, and then we put one on each. I am really curious to see if this makes a big difference. A lot of people commented that they wanted to see a control in this experiment, and I totally agree. So we've set up a 4th vacuum that's got just the filter in there, and there's no dust collection on that. So if you watch the other video, you're going to know that we put pound markings on these containers. We started with 50 pounds of flour because I thought it was a really good round number, and it turns out that's a ridiculous amount of flour. So a lot of people commented they wanted to see us try 5 pounds at a time and stop and check the filters. I think that's a great idea. I think we should have done that the last time. So let's start there. We'll just do 5 pounds of each, and then we'll stop and inspect the filters and see what they look like. All right, let's start with the Dustopper. Well, the hair on my arms is already standing up, so that's not a good sign. Oh, there's a shock. There's another one. That does not feel good. All right, this is the Dust Deputy. Ah! Ow! All right, that's probably close enough. Maybe the washer didn't show up to work today, but it's totally static in this hose, and you can kind of hear the little sparks or whatever they are. And this is the Dust Right. one so far has been better. I haven't been shocked nearly as much yet. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's stop there. All right, let's see if we overfilled this time. I have a hunch we did not. Oh yeah, not even close. So there's a very small amount in the bucket, and that's the dust stopper. So let's take a look at the vacuum and see what it looks like. That's pretty good. I would say there's almost no flour in the vacuum itself, but there's definitely some on the filter for sure. Even though this was a red filter, it's turning it blue. So there is some getting by, but it's definitely not nearly as much as when we did the other test. So I'm not convinced yet. So let's move on to the Dust Deputy. All right, Dust Deputy this time. Let's see how much we got in the bin. And same thing, a lot less. Definitely quite a bit around the top there. So yeah, we probably got pretty close to 5 pounds in that one. All right, and let's see what the Dust Deputy filter looks like. So the inside of the vacuum, I would say there's more flour in here, and there's definitely flour on the filter, but I wouldn't say, it's about the same. I'd say it's about the same as Dustopper, but the inside of the vacuum definitely looks good. So far, it's pretty consistent. We're definitely not getting nearly as much flour in the vacuums as our other test. And finally, the Dust Right. Probably sucked up a little bit more on this one, maybe like 6 or 7 pounds. This one did this the last time. There was a tremendous amount of flour on the lid, which made me instantly skeptical that the vacuum would be empty. So we've only sucked up maybe 7 pounds, and this thing's only about 3 inches full. Let's see what the vacuum looks like. So the vacuum's looking pretty clean inside. There's not a lot of dust in here, just a little bit. I would say there's less than the Dust Deputy. And the filter, it's about the same. This one actually has a little bit less maybe. There's a little less on the one side. So on the side where the vacuum actually shoots in, there's a little bit more. So pretty consistent, I would say, so far. So let's keep going, maybe go to 10 pounds and then do another check. All right, Dust Deputy round 2. Ow! Oh, wow. Ow. Ow, wow. All right, that's probably good enough for that one. All right, let's see what we got with the Dustopper for volume. Oh yeah, we're probably about double, maybe not quite double what we had before. Let's see what the filter looks like. All right, vacuum's getting a little bit more in the bottom. There's definitely some kind of accumulating in the bottom of the vacuum, and then it's getting to definitely be more on the filter. The filter actually is completely covered, and we're only like a quarter of that bucket, that 5-gallon bucket. So I guess I'll let you guys be the judge of whether this experiment is more accurate or not. We definitely have not overflowed the bucket yet, and I would say we're definitely getting accumulation in the vacuum. Is the filter plugged yet? No, not yet. All right, Dust Deputy's turn. Yeah, we got a little bit more in this one than we have in the Dustopper. Quite a bit on the lid. Yeah, there's quite a bit more building up in the bottom of this vacuum too. There's quite a bit in here. I mean, enough I can hold it in my hand. And the filter's definitely covered. So we're only a little over a quarter in the bucket, and our filter's already covered, and we're already starting to get accumulation in the vacuum on the Dust Deputy. And finally, the Dust Right. We're probably less than a quarter of this bin, and there's still a lot on the lid, which always makes me nervous, but whatever. So this one's actually the cleanest so far. There's no real accumulation in the bottom. There's not really anything I can pick up, and I'd say the filter is also the cleanest of them all so far, which kind of goes with the fact that the bin's not as full, but none of the bins are full by any means. Ow. final test on the Dustopper. We're about halfway on the bucket, and ironically the lid's looking pretty clean. I mean, there's really not nearly the amount on the lid as there is on the other ones, for what that's worth. Well, there's definitely, like, we're getting some in the bottom of the bin finally, and the filter's definitely covered. I mean, it's pretty thick. Is it plugged up? No, but there is a lot of flour on that filter. So is some getting by? Yes. Is it plugging the filter? No. But I think that's where the control is going to become helpful, is to figure out whether this flour will even really plug this filter at all. All right, and this is Dust Deputy. I have to say that there's a bit of irony here that this vacuum has, with the instructions, this like anti-static foil thing, and of all the things that electrocute me the most or shock me the most, it's this thing. It's the one that's actually got instructions on how to deal with that. So maybe it's the chalk, maybe it's the dust collection, I don't know. All right, we're same here, right at about half. That makes me feel good. So it's a fair comparison with our media. I would say the filter is definitely covered, just as much as the Dustopper. And then in the bin, we have, oh yeah, there's a definite quantity in the vacuum. And we're not overfilling the Dust Deputy at all. So I would say that on this test, I'm really skeptical that overfilling the bin on the last test is what caused the filter to have so much on it. I would argue that this is just natural for these devices, that there's going to be a certain amount of bypass. Is it going to clog your filter? Probably not. And finally, Dust Right. Ironically, this one is the one that shocked me the least. And this thing isn't even close to full. It's well below a quarter. Same amount of debris on top. That really hasn't changed all along with the test. It seems like that stayed pretty consistent. And again, this bin is looking pretty tidy in the bottom. There's really not much accumulation. I can't really pick up anything out of the inside of the bin. And I would say that the filter is the cleanest, probably twice as clean as the others. So again, this bin's obviously not as full. That could be the problem here. I'm not really sure, or the reason there's not as much, but there's definitely the reality that this one is doing a better job of keeping stuff out of the vacuum. I think it's obvious that this stuff works. I'm still not convinced that we screwed up the last test. I am convinced that we probably overfilled the buckets, but I'm not sure by how much. So it's obvious to me that the Dust Deputy is letting more flour through than the other two, and the best so far has been the Dust Right, which I guess is good information because we didn't have that on the last test. So taking it 5 pounds at a time is definitely working. But I think the big question that we all want to know is, what does the control vacuum do? Can we even plug up a vacuum that doesn't have a dust collector? So let's try that now. So let's start with the orange bin. It looks like we've got about 30 pounds of flour left in the orange bin. So we'll start here, and if we run out of flour, we'll move on to the next color. And if we get plugged up, we'll stop and try to figure out about how much. I guess we probably should have showed that on the other vacuums, but I think we can all agree that the suction was good before, so that's what we're starting with on the control vacuum. Wow, I'm being shocked so much. I don't know if this is even going to plug the vacuum. I mean, we're probably close to half the 30 pounds of flour. We're almost through 15. That vacuum's got to be getting pretty full. Ow! Wow! That made my arms spasm. I don't think it's going to plug the vacuum. Wow, that's actually surprising. We still have really good suction after about almost 20 pounds of flour. Ow! Well, we still have really good suction, and we're coming to the end of 30 pounds of flour. So I'm thinking that I think the conclusion may be that flour is not going to plug these filters. 30 pounds gone. Oh yeah, look at that. I'd say she's full, but it's clearly not plugging the vacuum. I mean, the suction's just as good as when we started, I would say. I mean, it's maybe a little bit of loss, but not a lot. So I guess the conclusion I'm coming to about your best baking flour is that if you need to suck up 50 pounds of flour, go for it, and then just keep like some way to shock yourself handy, because you're gonna get shocked like crazy. So there was another question that was asked in the comments, and I felt like it was a good question that we can fairly easily answer today. If there's other questions that would be really tough, like changing the media, what if we put like copier toner or gypsum dust or even sawdust? I think the conclusion we've come to is that flour won't plug the vacuum, which we didn't know that before because we didn't have the control. The question that I think is doable for us today is what happens if you hook these things in series? So what we need to do is get everything cleaned up, and we can hook these to each other, and let's just kind of test and see how much each one collects and whether the vacuum is sparkling clean at the end or whether some of it still gets through. All right, so I did the best I could, quick and dirty style, to clean all the dust collectors up, so they're probably 98%, and I think it's good enough to do this test. We've decided that we're gonna start the test with the Dustopper. That's gonna be the first place that the flour is gonna go, and then it's gonna go to the Dust Deputy, and then finally to the Dust Right. We concluded from the previous test that the Dust Right was doing the best job of separating things out, so we think making this the end will be fair. And then if anything gets to the vacuum, it's gonna be this guy's fault. I did clean the vacuum as best I could too, the filter, so we're not starting with a new filter, we're just kind of doing everything we can do. I did have to clean the vacuum with water, so I really, really hope we don't get any flour in there, because that's gonna suck to clean it. So the last test we did with this vacuum was the orange flour. So we're gonna use the blue flour this time. That way we can kind of confidently say what got to the vacuum. Sort of realizing that if I hold this crevice tool is when I'm getting shocked, but if I hold back here, for some reason I don't get shocked as much. Yeah, we're getting quite a bit in the Dustopper, so let's go a little bit more. It's getting pretty full. Let's maybe go about there. We'll call that good. It looks like it was pretty close to about 20 pounds, I don't know, maybe 18 pounds or something of flour. All right, first line of defense is Dustopper. Yeah, there's probably at least 12 pounds of flour in there. It's pretty clean, so that's good. So the real question is, what's in the next bin? Uh-oh. Well, there's a little in there. Definitely some in the bottom. And the Dustopper is nowhere near full. So that's definitely finding its way through. So that was line of defense number 2. Last stop before it hits the vacuum. Whoa, that's clean. There's nothing in there. I mean, there's a little film, but that's pretty good. Final stop. Looks clean. I mean, there's a little bit there. Actually, all of that looks like it was just stuff that was stuck in different things, because that's not blue flour, that's orange flour. So I'm thinking that was probably in the hose, and it might have been in some of the hoses that were leading up to this, but it definitely wasn't something that we just sucked up. So that little bit of orange flour that's on there was there before. So I would say the answer for flour is 2 dust collectors is probably enough to stop flour. I don't think you even need the third one, and nothing in the vacuum at all. So we know that there's a certain amount getting through the Dustopper. We feel like there's hardly anything getting through the Dust Deputy, which kind of doesn't make sense because in the previous experiment, the Dust Deputy seemed to be the one that performed the worst. So I think we should do just a quick test. We should skip the Dustopper and we'll just vacuum straight into the Dust Deputy, and then we'll check the Dust Right, and then we'll check the vacuum, and that should give us a fairly conclusive idea about how much each one of these is stopping when we run them in series. All right, that's pretty good. Let's try that. Okay, one thing we have to all agree on is that this is horrifyingly impractical. So if you're gonna go with the whole dust collector in series thing, you're gonna want a bigger shop. So we only got about maybe 6 pounds in there. It seemed like we had sucked up quite a bit more than that, but. So there's definitely some getting past the dust deputy. I think this one's proven more than once that stuff definitely gets by. So in the series test, it seems like we can say so far that the one that seems to perform the best is the Dust-Rite. In the singular test, both the Dustopper and the Dust Deputy were letting some by, and the Dust-Rite so far has proven that it's let the least by. I guess we could check the vacuum really quick and see if there's anything in here. Uh-oh, there's a little bit. It's not much. But there's definitely a little bit. Yeah, you can see in the vacuum that there's a little bit there. So, man, I don't know. That's a really tough one. When I say that it did the best, I say that it let the least amount through, not that it didn't let any through. Well, guys, I feel like today was a much more conclusive test. I feel like we kind of proved that we did some things that maybe didn't make the test as convincing the last time. There's definitely some things that we learned from these, in this test. The Dust-Rite seems to be doing a great job. We can say conclusively that when you hook them in series, they definitely do get progressively better, although it's really debatable about which one passes more to the other. I can almost say for a fact that these grounding washers are a chuckle, but I did learn that if you don't grab the crevice tool, but you grab kind of the cuff of the hose, the shocking is much, much less. So take that for what it's worth. And the answer to the dust collection question, I don't know if I can say conclusively that these things work. I guess the answer that we came up with today is that flour does not clog the filter on these wet-dry vacuums. So we would need to try this test, I guess, again with a different media, something that will for sure clog the vacuum, to decide whether the amount of stuff that these systems are bypassing is acceptable or not. Of course, there were people in the comments who were saying, oh, mine works fantastic. Well, that's very subjective. I guess you would need to try all three, and I guess we would need to try an equivalent media to make sure that we're being fair in our testing. I guess for me, I'm still not completely sold. I ended the last video with, I'll let you guys decide, and I guess I'm still there. I'm not completely sold on these yet. I haven't had a chance to put a bunch of really fine dust, wood dust or anything, sheetrock dust or anything through them. Maybe when I get a chance to do that, it'll start to really show which ones work and which ones don't. In the last video's comments, there were a few people, I'll say more than a few people, who were super concerned that we were wasting a perfectly good food material. So we've come up with a recipe for you folks. We'll leave that in the description below. We hope you enjoy it. If you try it, let us know how it turns out for you. Half a cup blue flour, 6 eggs, half a cup of milk, and syrup. Okay, yeah, we can do that. Alyssa, dinner's ready.